I received the divorce papers via hospital email during a 12-hour trauma surgery. 11 years of marriage terminated in a 3-paragraph PDF attachment. My name is Michael Reynolds, 43, Chief Trauma Surgeon at Mercy General Hospital. I was elbow deep in a multiple gunshot victim when my phone buzzed with a notification. The subject line read, "Moving forward amicably." The message itself was brief and cold. Caroline had already filed the paperwork. She'd already emptied our joint savings account. She'd already moved her new boyfriend, Thomas, into our lakeside home in Northbrook. I read the email twice during a brief break, locked my phone, scrubbed back in, and finished saving my patient's life. I said nothing to anyone. While I completed the post-op notes at 3 a.m., I replied with 2 words, acknowledged. Proceeding. No arguments. No pleading. No threats. Sarah, the night shift charge nurse, noticed something was off. "Rough night, Dr. Reynolds?" she asked while updating the patient board. "Just the usual," I replied, complicated GSW to the abdomen. She nodded, knowing better than a push. Hospital staff understand when to maintain professional distance. Truth is, I wasn't blindsided. 6 months before this marathon surgery week, things had changed, subtle things. Caroline stopped asking about my cases, started working late at the marketing firm where she managed accounts, started attending wellness retreats on weekends, but never seemed to look any more relaxed. New wardrobe, new social circle I never met, new password patterns on her devices. I didn't confront her or start checking her messages. That's not my approach. I observe, diagnose, then act just like in the OR. I wasn't oblivious either, so I made some quiet precautionary measures. Nothing dramatic, just safeguards. I secured essential documents in a safety deposit box at a different bank branch. Birth certificate, marriage license, house deed, primarily in my name due to the physician mortgage loan program. I relocated my grandfather's vintage stethoscope and my mother's jewelry to the same location, heirlooms that mattered. I also established a separate account and began directing a portion of my on-call pay there. Not enough to raise suspicions, but sufficient to provide stability if the situation deteriorated. The night before my week-long trauma rotation began, Caroline hugged me mechanically and said, "Try not to work yourself to death." Her eyes were distant, as if she were addressing an acquaintance, not her husband heading into 7 consecutive 24-hour shifts. I should have recognized the finality in that goodbye. Part of me still hoped my differential diagnosis was wrong. It wasn't. What Caroline failed to realize was that I'd prepared for this contingency. And what she didn't comprehend was that while I avoid conflicts, I never abandon patients or myself. I met Caroline at a hospital fundraising gala in 2012. I was finishing my trauma fellowship, temporarily covering the event's first aid station. She was coordinating the evening's marketing materials, elegant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. We were married 10 months later. Caroline used to say she admired my dedication to medicine, though she never truly understood the demands. Her father was a corporate attorney, her mother an interior designer, no medical professionals in her family. She'd occasionally comment on when I might cut back to normal hours, not recognizing that in trauma surgery, unpredictable schedules are the standard of care, not a temporary phase. We purchased our lakeside property in 2016. Nothing ostentatious, but comfortable and peaceful. My name was primary on the mortgage through the physician home loan program, but I added her to the deed because that's what committed partners do. They share their lives. My father passed away 2 years after our wedding. Massive cerebral hemorrhage, ironically, while I was performing similar surgery on another patient. My mother followed 4 years later, pancreatic cancer, despite my connections to every oncology specialist in the region. They left me some investments, not substantial wealth, but enough that Caroline and I could eliminate her student loans and establish a modest emergency fund. I rotated through 4 different trauma centers during our marriage. Detroit, Chicago, Baltimore, then back to Chicago. Each time I transitioned, Caroline seemed increasingly distant, increasingly restless, as if playing a role she'd outgrown. I didn't marry a ghost who lives at the hospital, she remarked once after I mentioned potentially taking the trauma medical director position. I'm tired of attending functions alone and explaining your absences. I understood her perspective, truly, but medicine, specifically trauma surgery, was where I made a tangible difference. I was skilled at my profession. People survived because of my decisions. In 2020, subtle changes became noticeable. Initially, Caroline grew irritated when I called during her networking events. Started mentioning how her colleague Jennifer had divorced her husband and was living authentically now. Began making observations about our diverging life paths. I suggested couples therapy. She insisted we were adjusting to new priorities. Then came unexplained late nights at the office, weekend professional development, workshops with associates I'd never been introduced to. The designer clothes, the fitness studio membership she rarely utilized. I should have confronted the symptoms directly, but that's not my methodology. Never has been. My medical training taught me to gather comprehensive data before presenting a diagnosis. So I observed and prepared methodically because my clinical intuition was signaling an imminent crisis. And in my profession, you learn to trust those instincts. They save lives. 2 weeks after receiving the divorce email, I was reviewing patient charts when my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Another withdrawal, $12,500, nearly everything left in our joint account. I set down my pen and opened the app. The balance was down to $187.42. Our savings, $52,000 built up over years, had vanished, completely transferred to an unknown account. Dr. Chun, my fellow trauma surgeon, glanced over. Bad news. I locked my phone. Just some account issues. That night, I called our bank from my office. Caroline had been moving money for weeks, small amounts at first, then larger sums. The big transfers started the day after my trauma rotation began. I stood by the window for a long time, watching ambulances arrive, life and death happening all around while mine was falling apart. That's when Sarah, our charge nurse, found me. Heard for Dr. Chun you looked shaken earlier, she said. What's going on? I don't usually share personal matters, but Sarah had pulled me through some tough cases. I trusted her. Caroline emptied our accounts and moved her boyfriend into our house, I said. Sent divorce papers while I was in surgery last week. Sarah didn't offer platitudes. She just asked, what's your plan? Not sure yet, I replied. She nodded. Let me know if you need anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I logged into our home security system, something Caroline probably forgot I could access remotely. The camera showed an unfamiliar car in our driveway, a man I'd never seen before walking our dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my Northwestern hoodie. And there was Caroline, laughing in the kitchen I'd renovated myself during my last vacation. Something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder, clearer. I closed my laptop and made a list. 1. Call James, med school friend turned lawyer. 2. Review mortgage terms. 3. Contact HR about leave options. 4. Check recent home equity documents Caroline mentioned casually. 5. Secure access to retirement accounts. I didn't feel hurt anymore. I felt focused, like prepping for a complex surgery. This wasn't about emotion now. This was about strategy. At 5 a.m., before rounds, I emailed James. Need legal counsel, urgent and discreet. His reply came an hour later. Call me. Secure line only. When I hung up from that call, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to confront her. I just needed to wait, watch, and let her own actions become the evidence. 2 weeks after that email, I met James at a quiet diner outside the hospital. He was already there, nursing a coffee, legal pad in front of him. You look like hell, Mike, he said as I slid into the booth. Feel worse, I replied, ordering a black coffee. James pushed a folder across the table. I've got what we discussed. Bank statements, property records, and this. He pulled out a separate document. Found something interesting when I dug into your finances. It was a home equity loan application with my signature, except it wasn't mine. Closed but off. The middle initial was wrong, and the stroke pattern didn't match my usual scrawl. Caroline did this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. James nodded. 3 months ago. Used it to pull out $50,000. Your signature is required since the physician mortgage is in your name only. I took a deep breath. Forge my signature, take out a loan against our house, then clear out our accounts and divorce me. Busy woman. It gets better, James said. She listed Thomas as a co-applicant. He's got a record, 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2018. What are my options? Several, James replied. But first, you need to decide what you want. I thought about it. I want what's legally mine, and I want her to face consequences. James smiled grimly. Then here's what we do. The next day, I met with the hospital's legal counsel, Sarah Patel. She'd handled malpractice cases for us before, but this was different. Forgery, financial fraud, potential conspiracy, she said, reviewing the documents. This goes beyond a simple divorce, Dr. Reynolds. I nodded. What's our next move? We file a report with the bank's fraud department, Sarah explained. Then we petition the court for an emergency freeze on all joint assets. We'll need to move quickly. As we worked through the paperwork, my pager went off. Multiple vehicle pileup on the highway. I have to go, I said, standing. Sarah nodded. Go save lives, doctor. I'll handle this. Hours later, covered in blood and exhausted, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Caroline. A text. We need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? I didn't respond. Instead, I called James. The bank froze the accounts, he said. And there's more. That loan? It wasn't the only one. We found 2 more, totaling over $100,000. I sat down heavily. Where did the money go? That's the interesting part, James said. Multiple transfers to someone named Eric Donovan. Not Thomas. Who's Eric Donovan? Working on that. But here's where it gets big, Gerd, to 3 other cases, all involving spouses of medical professionals. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just Caroline leaving me. This was something calculated, something that had happened to others. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, James said. This crosses state lines, involves multiple victims. They're interested. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the wall, wondering if Caroline had been playing me our entire marriage or if she'd gotten swept up in something bigger, wondering if it even mattered anymore. My phone buzzed. Another text from Caroline. Michael, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, Who is Eric Donovan? 3 dots appeared as she started typing, then stopped. Started again. Stopped. Finally, I don't know what you're talking about. I turned off my phone and went to check on my patients. The truth would come out soon enough. For now, I had lives to save. 2 weeks later, I was back at Mercy General. I hadn't told Caroline I was returning. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown under an alias and contacted James. We met at a diner far from the hospital. You look exhausted, he said, sliding into the booth. Feel worse? I replied. James handed me a folder about everything we discussed. Bank statements, property records, and this. He pulled out a separate document. Found something interesting in your finances. It was a home equity loan application with my signature, except it wasn't mine. Close but off. The middle initial was wrong, and the stroke pattern didn't match. Caroline did this? I asked, though I already knew. James nodded. 3 months ago. Used it to pull out $50,000. Your signature is required since the physician mortgage is in your name. I took a deep breath. Forge my signature, take out a loan, clear out our accounts, then divorce me. Busy woman. It gets worse, James said. She listed Thomas as a co-applicant. He's got priors, 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2018. What are my options? Several, James said. But first, you need to decide what you want. I thought about it. I want what's legally mine, and I want her to face consequences. James smiled grimly. Then here's what we do. The next day, I met with Sarah Patel, the hospital's legal counsel. She'd handled malpractice cases before, but this was different. Forgery, financial fraud, potential conspiracy, she said, reviewing the documents. This goes beyond a simple divorce, Dr. Reynolds. I nodded. What's our next move? We file a report with the bank's fraud department, Sarah explained. Then we petition the court for an emergency freeze on all joint assets. We'll need to move quickly. As we worked through the paperwork, my pager went off. Multi-car pileup on the highway. I have to go, I said, standing. Sarah nodded. Go save lives, doctor. I'll handle this. Hours later, covered in blood and exhausted, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Caroline. A text. We need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? I didn't respond. Instead, I called James. The bank froze the accounts, he said. And there's more. That loan? It wasn't the only one. We found 2 more, totaling over $100,000. I sat down heavily. Where did the money go? That's the interesting part, James said. Multiple transfers to someone named Eric Donovan. Not Thomas. Who's Eric Donovan? Working on that. But here's where it gets bigger. We've linked this to 3 other cases, all involving spouses of medical professionals. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just Caroline. This was something calculated, something that had happened to others. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, James said. This crosses state lines, involves multiple victims. They're interested. 2 days later, I met with FBI agents Johnson and Martinez at their field office. They recorded my statement, took copies of all the documents James and I had gathered. Your case helps establish a pattern, Agent Johnson explained. Shows intent, organization. Makes it a conspiracy rather than isolated incidents. What about Caroline? I asked. My ex-wife. The agents exchanged looks. We're still determining her level of involvement, Martinez said carefully. Did she ever mention financial difficulties, pressure to sell the house? I thought back. She kept saying we were house poor, that we should downsize. I didn't see the need. Our mortgage was manageable on my salary. Johnson made a note. When did that start? About 6 months ago. Around the time, she must have met Thomas. They asked more questions, took more notes. When we finished, Johnson handed me her card. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, don't confront your wife or Thomas. We need to build this case carefully. I nodded. Understood. That evening, I drove past her house. Thomas's car was gone, but Caroline's was in the driveway. My phone buzzed. Text from Caroline. We need to talk in person. Meet me at Lakeshore Park tomorrow. 10 a.m. I showed the text to James over breakfast the next day. Don't go, he advised. Nothing good can come from talking to her right now. I won't, I said, but I want to know what she's doing while she thinks I'm meeting her. We parked across from the house at 9:30 a.m. At 9:45, Caroline left, driving towards Lakeshore Park. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up. Real estate agent's logo on the door. Eric Donovan. Thomas came out to greet him. They talked in the driveway, then went inside. Should we follow? James asked. I shook my head. No need. I installed security cameras last year. Interior and exterior. They upload to cloud storage. James smiled. You didn't mention that before. Never came up, I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the security app and angled the screen so James could see. Donovan and Thomas were in our living room. Donovan was taking photos. Thomas was pointing out features. I turned up the volume. Should list by end of week, Donovan was saying. I've got a buyer interested already. Cash offer, as usual. How much? Thomas asked. $420,000. We list at $470,000. They offer $420,000. Everybody's happy. What about the husband? Caroline says he's causing trouble. Donovan waved dismissively. Doctors are all the same. They make noise, but they've got patience. LL take a settlement to make it go away. I turned to James. You getting this? He was already recording the feed on his phone. Every word. I forwarded the security feed access to Agent Johnson with a short message. Happening now. 30 minutes later, our house was surrounded by FBI vehicles. I watched from down the street as agents led Donovan and Thomas out in handcuffs. My phone rang. Agent Johnson. Got them on tape discussing the fraud scheme, she said. Plus conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempting to sell property under false pretenses. We're going to need a formal statement from you. Of course, I said. And Dr. Reynolds, your wife just arrived at the scene. She's distressed. I looked down the street. Caroline was standing on our lawn, hands over her mouth, watching as FBI agents carried boxes of documents from our house. What happens to her? I asked. That depends, Johnson said, on what she knew and on what you want. I watched Caroline for a long moment. 11 years of marriage. Good years at the beginning, before whatever this had become. I just want what's right, I said finally. The federal case moved quickly. Thomas and Donovan both took plea deals, implicating each other and several other conspirators in what turned out to be a three-state operation targeting medical professionals. Caroline maintained she knew nothing about the larger scheme, said Thomas had convinced her I was hiding money, planning to leave her with nothing. Said the refinance was his idea. She'd just gone along with it. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, she agreed to a settlement. Full restitution of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any claim to the house or my retirement accounts, signed confession about the forgery in exchange for reduced charges. I didn't push for more. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that email during surgery. No fault. Clean break, all things considered. On the day the last paperwork was signed, I got a call from Agent Johnson. Thomas was sentenced today. 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Donovan got 12. Thought you'd want to know. Thank you, I said. There's something else, she added. We found evidence they've done this to 11 other medical families. Your case helped us build the pattern. Those families might get their money back because of you. After we hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the wall, thinking about those other families. Other doctors who came home from long shifts to find their lives emptied out. I hadn't planned on being the one to bring down Thomas and Donovan's operation. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes things work out in ways you don't expect. My phone buzzed. Text from Caroline. I never meant for things to end this way. I didn't respond to say. I sold the house 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Couldn't stand to live in those rooms anymore. Too many memories of what I thought was real. Used the money to buy a small cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina. 2 bedrooms, wraparound porch, 5 acres of mountain land. No neighbors for miles. I took early retirement from Mercy General. 22 years of trauma surgery was enough. I'd given enough. I got a dog, a golden retriever named Scout. Started doing volunteer work at the local free clinic, nothing fancy, just basic checkups and health education talks for folks who couldn't afford regular doctors. My hands stayed busy, my mind stayed clear. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch in the evenings, Scout at my feet, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. I learned to make furniture in my spare time, simple stuff, chairs and tables for neighbors who needed them. Turned out my surgical precision translated well to woodworking. Steady hands, attention to detail, patience with the process. The work reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place, to help people, to fix things that were broken. One morning, I found a letter in my mailbox from a woman in Denver. Her husband was a surgeon too, deployed with Doctors Without Borders when his wife tried to pull the same scheme Caroline and Thomas had run on me. She'd read about my case in a medical journal article about financial fraud targeting healthcare workers. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved our marriage. When I showed my husband what happened to you, he realized what his wife was planning. They're in counseling now, working things out. Thank you for fighting back when it would have been easier to just disappear. I read that letter 3 times, then pinned it to my kitchen wall. Some days when the quiet got too loud or the memories too sharp, I'd look at that letter and remember that something good had come from all the pain. Last I heard, Caroline was working at a dental office in Portland, starting over, I guess. Thomas got out of prison last year, moved to Florida. I didn't hate them anymore. Didn't feel much of anything about them, honestly. They made their choices, faced their consequences. I made mine too. As for me, I was building something new, something that couldn't be stolen or forged or betrayed. Something that was just mine. The mountains didn't care about my past. The patients at the clinic didn't know about the divorce. Scout didn't judge my mistakes. I was learning that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, quietly, on your own terms. Some things can't be taken from you, like the peace you make with yourself and the life you choose to build from whatever's left.